fellow cast member died in a car accident around 12:30 Sunday morning during filming.
10 people connected to Street Outlaws are dead. Several more are sitting behind bars in 2026. What started as a show about illegal street racing and high-speed glory turned into something far more real, where the risks didn't stay on the track. Behind the burnouts and bragging rights, tragedy struck some of the biggest names in the franchise, while others went from racing for money to facing prison time. So, how did it get this far? Did the dangers of the street racing world spill over into real life? Or was it always heading here from the start? Join us as we find out which Street Outlaws members are dead or in jail. Ryan Fellows, the crash they couldn't walk away from. Ryan Fellows was not the most recognizable name on Street Outlaws, but his death became the most legally significant in the show's entire run. Before cameras found him, he had built a life around cars, business, and family. Racing funded everything he cared about, and he was serious about it long before a production crew showed up with cameras. When Street Outlaws came to him, he was ready. On the night of August 7th, 2022, he lined up his gold Nissan 240Z on a stretch of road near North Las Vegas Boulevard, roughly 25 miles outside the city. The road had been closed for the shoot. The production crew was in position, cameras were rolling, and Ryan pushed the 240Z down the strip. Near the finish line, the car lost control. It began rolling. People watching counted the multiple violent flips, each one worse than the last. When the car finally stopped moving, it was on fire. Emergency crews responded immediately. There was nothing to be done. Ryan died at the scene. He was 41 years old. Discovery released a statement calling him part of the Street Outlaws family and expressing condolences to the people he left behind. In the months that followed, his family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Warner Brothers, Discovery, and Lionsgate Entertainment. The lawsuit alleged gross negligence and raised a question the network never fully answered. Were the conditions that night safe enough for what was being filmed? Legal filings pointed to one detail at the center of everything. The production did not have an authorized filming permit at the time of the crash. A permit from the Nevada Department of Transportation had been obtained to close the road. But the broader question of production authorization was what the family's lawyers pursued. They argued that the people responsible for putting Ryan on that road had not done everything they were required to do. Nevada's OSHA launched a formal inspection. The case moved into civil court. It was the first on-camera death in the show's history. Ryan's son, Josiah, wrote publicly about what the crash had taken. His father was supposed to watch him play his final high school basketball season. He was supposed to be in the stands at graduation. He was supposed to be there on the day Josiah got married. And when Josiah eventually became a father himself, his own father was supposed to be there for that too. Each of those was a specific promise the crash canceled. Josiah listed them one by one, and reading them made it impossible to see the accident as anything other than what it was. A father who never came home from a job he had every reason to believe was professionally managed. None of that happened. The family was still fighting in court for answers when another face from the same show was already running out of time, and almost nobody knew it. She kept racing while secretly fighting stage 4 cancer. And the moment she finally told the world, nobody in that community saw it the same way again. Lizzie Musey, racing while dying. While Street Outlaws fans were watching Lizzie Musey race, she was already dying. She had been diagnosed with triple-negative stage 4 breast cancer, one of the most aggressive forms of the disease, and she told almost nobody. She showed up to the race, lined up at the tree, ran her times, then drove home to treatment that left her drained and in pain, and came back and did it again. The cameras never showed it. Her pink and black Camaro, the one she called Bonnie, became one of the most recognized cars on Street Outlaws. Fans responded to the confidence, the focus, and the way she carried herself before a race, like the outcome was already settled. She made history as the first female driver to win a No Prep Kings event and had no interest in being defined by it. She wanted to be the best racer on the list, not the best female racer. And she raced like that distinction mattered, because to her it did. Her father, Pat, had built engines for some of the fastest cars in the country, and Lizzie had grown up inside that world. She did not inherit the reputation. She built her own. She found a relationship with Kai Kelly, a fellow racer who understood exactly what this life cost and chose to be beside her through the hardest version of it. When the diagnosis came, his family did not step back. They moved closer. The racing community, once she made it public in April 2023, showed up in a way that surprised even people inside the sport. Drivers who had raced against her, crews who had worked alongside her, fans who had only ever seen her through a screen, all of them responded. On June 27, 2024, Lizzie passed away at her home in North Carolina, her family beside her. She was 33. She had been in a relationship with Jeffrey Earnhardt, a fourth-generation NASCAR driver and the grandson of Dale Earnhardt Sr. She never got to see what it became. Ryan had been 41. Two people tied to the same show are gone within 2 years. And the next one happened in front of a live crowd, in real time, with nobody able to do a thing about it. Nathan climbed into the Z unit that night, looking like every other runner. So what went wrong in the seconds, nobody could stop. Nathan Shaldak. Full speed, no warning. Nathan Shaldak raced under the name Cali Nate, and by the time Street Outlaws found him, he had already spent years building a reputation that had nothing to do with television. He loaded his trailer, drove across the country to events most racers would not bother entering, and beat people on surfaces that gave nobody an advantage. His small-tire Mustang, a car he called My Little Pony, had become one of the most feared setups in no-prep racing. Promoters knew his name. Competitors knew his car. The people who lined up next to him knew what they were getting into. He came from a racing family. His father and sister both competed, and Nathan had been around cars and tracks since he was a teenager. He turned it into a full-time career and eventually into a national profile through Street Outlaws, where he raced first in a big-tire Camaro and later in the small-tire Mustang that made him a name beyond the local scene. He traveled to events that other racers skipped, competed on tracks he had never seen before, and built his standing race by race without shortcuts. On April 6, 2024, he was in Eagle Pass, Texas, lined up for what had been a normal night of competition. The crowd was there, the cars were staged, and Nathan climbed into the Z unit and rolled to the line. Midway through the run, the car hit a rough patch in the road. On a prepared surface at that speed, it might have been manageable. On a no-prep surface, it was not. The Z unit began to spin with no window for correction, swerved, and hit with full force. Nathan had his helmet on, the harness in place. He had followed every safety protocol the sport required. The impact was beyond what any of it was built to absorb. Emergency crews got him to a hospital. The next morning, his longtime girlfriend Courtney Paulshock posted on Facebook, confirming what the racing world had already started to dread. Nathan had not made it. He was in his 40s. He left behind a son named Austin and a daughter named Michelle, two children who lost their father on a Texas road during a race that had started like every other one before it. The people who had competed against him for years paid tribute to a reputation earned track by track, in a sport that gives nothing away. 3 funerals, 3 families. And still, the show went on. But the ones who died weren't the only ones who paid. The next names on this list never made a tribute reel, because the show never acknowledged them at all. 3 people connected to this show died away from the cameras. So why did Discovery never say a single word about any of them? The deaths nobody talked about. Wayne Smozanek survived 30 years of motorsports and was taken by a virus in February 2022. He was 60. He had come to No Prep Kings after years on the US HRA monster truck circuit as the owner and driver of Tropical Thunder, a career built on showing up before the stars arrived, helping others prep, and staying after they had gone home. He was not there for the spotlight. He was there because racing was what he knew and what he had done his entire adult life. His wife, Wendy, kept the people who cared about him updated as the weeks passed, and his condition refused to improve. By February 12, 2022, his body had reached a point it could not come back from. He left behind his wife, his son, and a community of racers who had known him across decades of competition. Discovery said nothing. The show moved on. Tyler Pretty was there before the cameras were. He and Justin Shearer had raced together in the Oklahoma City scene long before Street Outlaws existed as anything other than an idea. His 1980s Chevy El Camino was a real threat in that scene, and the reputation he built was entirely his own. He was one of the first people to believe the show could be something before it had an audience, before it had a network, before it had proven anything at all. On May 28, 2013, he died at 31 years old. The cause was never made public. The people closest to him kept it private, and that privacy has held. He had spent years earning a place in that world and was gone before most of the people who would have watched him ever got the chance to know his name. Discovery never circled back. Kentucky never drove a car in competition. He built them, tuned them, and kept them alive through the kind of mechanical problem that ends a race night for everyone else. He worked at Midwest Street Cars in Oklahoma City from the first season in 2013 through 2018, and he was as responsible for what those cars did on screen as anyone who sat behind the wheel. On September 9, 2020, he was found unresponsive at his home. He was 39. Drug paraphernalia was at the scene. Reports pointed to a heroin overdose. He was survived by his mother and 6 siblings. Not one episode addressed it. But the people still alive were not all walking free. Some of them had already ended up in a cell, and how they got there is more complicated than any arrest report shows. He was on screen every single week. But what was JJ's full history with the law before Street Outlaws ever found him? From the track to a cell. Before Street Outlaws existed, JJ had already served more than 8 years in federal prison. The show never brought it up. He came into it carrying that history, while millions of fans watched him race every week without knowing. When Street Outlaws, Memphis launched on Discovery in 2018, he was its lead. The man who ran the Memphis crew took on challengers from across the country and built one of the show's most recognizable operations entirely around his family. Then, in 2024, his name showed up in law enforcement records again. He was arrested and booked on aggravated assault charges stemming from an incident that unfolded during filming. He posted a $30,000 surety bond. As of 2026, the case remains unresolved in court. According to court filings, a man was being physically assaulted while the camera crew stood nearby with a clear view of what was happening. According to those filings, the instruction given was not to stop filming. It was to move the camera closer and get a better shot of the man's face while the assault was ongoing. Discovery has never publicly addressed what those filings describe. Chuck Seitzinger's road to a cell looked nothing like JJ's. He had raced Death Trap, a Fox body Mustang that had become one of the most recognized cars on the 405, at a level that earned real respect from the people who competed against him for years. Then, COVID put him in a hospital ICU. While he was lying there, his children called, needing help. He could not get to them. What followed ended in a conviction for making a threat of violence and placing a threatening phone call, a 60-day sentence in the Oklahoma County Jail. He served 25 days, completed mandatory anger management, and walked out. He said publicly he had been protecting his children and had handled it the wrong way. The show that had put his career in front of millions never addressed a single day of it. Rhett Peters' situation was the most serious of the three. When law enforcement raided his property, what they found was not the result of one bad night. Methamphetamine, scales, drug paraphernalia, and weapons. He tested positive for multiple substances at the scene. What the investigation turned up was not consistent with personal use. The scales pointed to distribution. The weapons found alongside the drugs pointed to something that had been protected over time. Investigators concluded the operation had been active for years, not weeks. Rhett had been appearing on a national television show, building a racing profile, competing in events across the country, and running something else entirely beneath it all. Nobody in the racing community had seen it coming. Nothing in his public presence had pointed toward it, which made the raid harder to process for the people who had watched him compete for years and believed they understood who he was. Investigators concluded it had been operating alongside his racing career for years, not a moment that spiraled out of control, but something that had been running the entire time, quietly. Daddy Dave's car somersaulted 6 times at full speed in Texas, and what the men watching from the pit lane decided next would define the final chapter of the show. The ones who got out. Before any of them walked away, one man had already been shown exactly what staying could cost. In 2015, Daddy Dave's car somersaulted 6 times in Amarillo and slammed into a concrete wall. Parts of his body were fractured. The car was destroyed. A nitrous bottle broke loose and struck his helmet, the only reason he survived. He rebuilt, came back, and kept racing. But he had felt the gap between a good run and a bad one close completely, and he carried that with him every time he lined up after it. The men who eventually chose to leave had watched that crash from the pit lane. Justin Shearer had been the center of Street Outlaws since the first episode. He was not just the fastest name on the 405 list, he was the one who held the crew together, the one fans pointed to when they explained what the show was about. He had built his reputation in the Oklahoma City street scene before the cameras arrived, and when they did arrive, he treated it as a responsibility to keep the racing real. And for years, it worked. Then the spin-offs started. The production structure shifted, and the version of Street Outlaws that existed in 2022 had very little in common with what he had originally agreed to be part of. New rules, new formats, and a crew pulled in from outside the original scene. All of it added pressure, without adding anything Justin recognized. In 2022, he walked away during the America's List season. He moved back to the garage, working on cars without a broadcast date, setting the pace. He said publicly that the show had shaped things he never wanted shaped. Walking away was how he took them back. Sean Ellington's exit came from the same place, but looked different on the outside. He was one of the most technically capable people on the 405 list, someone who understood what was under the hood in ways most drivers paid someone else to handle. When the show's demands started working against him, he went back to 187 Customs, building cars with his father and his son, without a production schedule, deciding what the work was worth. He talked openly about the time the show had taken from his family and made clear he was not interested in giving it more. Jeff Bonnet did not make his exit a story. That silence was the most Jeff thing he could have done. He and Farm Truck had always cared more about the build than the broadcast. When the broadcast stopped serving them, they went back to the build, their own spin-off, their own schedule, and their own rules. If Discovery's camera crew reportedly kept filming while a man was being assaulted on set, does that make every person who watched that episode part of the problem? Or is that entirely on the network? Which cast member's story hit you hardest, and why? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.